Hey everyone, welcome to Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast. This podcast is all about farmers markets, how to increase your market business success while providing people with fresh food. Farmers markets are essential. Whether you're a farmers market manager or a small farmer or food maker selling at farmers markets, you have found just the right podcast. This week we're chatting with Jake Johannes, farmer at Sacred Sun Cooperative Farm in Perry, Kansas, and board chair for the Brookside Farmers Market in Kansas City, Missouri, about vendor-owned and operated farmers markets. I'm one of your hosts, Bridget Myers. I'm a longtime farmers market manager and education coordinator at Farmers Market Pros.
And I'm Kat Fields-White, director of San Diego Markets, still an active farmers market manager, market consultant, and founder of Farmers Market Pros, host of the Farmers Market Pros community.
And I'm Justine Marzoni-Mead, Tent Talk producer and marketing director for Farmers Market Pros.
Today's episode of Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast, is supported by American Farmland Trust. Protecting farm and ranch land is a key way to combat climate change, and fostering a new generation of farmers keeps our food system secure. Your membership in AFT contributes to initiatives like Farms Under Threat, actively working to keep farmers farming. That means healthy food and vibrant markets for all of us. No farms, no future. To find more information and join American Farmland Trust, click their logo on the resource page at farmersmarketpros.com.
Well, welcome back to Tent Talk, everybody. This week we're joined by Jake Johannes, farmer and board chair at the Brookside Farmers Market in Kansas City, Missouri. As a year-round, all-volunteer farmer and vendor-run organization, the Brookside Farmers Market has a unique perspective on what it takes to operate a farmers market that serves its community and its participants. Welcome to Tent Talk, Jake.
Hi.
We're so happy to have you on today. We have a lot of questions, so I'm going to jump right in. We're very curious about your system there.
Bridget's first question actually was how Kansas City could be in both Kansas and Missouri.
I am already geographically challenged, and then I heard that there's a city in two states. So
it's like if a train leaves Kansas City, Kansas.
Sounds like a word problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh my goodness. Well, we'll start a little bit further back. We'll get to those questions. But can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into farming?
Yeah. Well, I grew up on a small family farm in Northeast Kansas, and was actually encouraged from a young age to pursue anything but farming. Yeah, I went off and I studied architecture, and I worked as an architect in Kansas City for a number of years. And then in 2008, when the economy crashed, both my offices closed. So I decided to kind of revisit farming with a different spin. Rather than corn and beans, I studied at the Kansas City Center for Urban Agriculture. Now it's called Cultivate Kansas City, the Gibbs Road Farm, and learned about intensive vegetable production with organic methods and selling at farmers markets. And the first market I sold at was the Brookside Farmers Market. So from there, yeah, it was great. I ended up leaving Kansas City and going back to my family farm in 2010 and convinced my parents, let's try organic. We converted to organic practices, and we've been certified with OCIA since 2013. And then we started this farm, Sacred Sun Cooperative Farm, closer to Lawrence, Kansas, which is a college town. That's where the University of Kansas is. And we, sell or grow for families in Lawrence, Topeka, Kansas City, and the surrounding areas.
Nice. What do you guys grow there on your farm?
A really diverse assortment of vegetables, some fruits, and then also Jess, my partner, does a lot of work with herbalism. She grows a lot of things for both medicinal and culinary herbs, and makes a lot of different herbal products like really great teas and tinctures and things like that. We also grow grains and dried beans and corn, so we sell like freshly ground flour and grits every week at market.
Oh my God.
You are
We're
a
like
dream farmer.
Yeah, we're jealous of that. We run markets in Southern California, and California is slim on grain growers, so it's tougher for us to get flour and things. A little bit better up north, Farmer Mize up there and such, but down here it's rough, so love that.
That sounds nice. It's such a great addition, to a farmer's market, and then having like fruits and vegetables, and then also having those extra things that are kind of special and always taste better when you can buy them local.
Whole pie.
Yeah, you can make a whole pie.
Right.
And growing tea, I feel like that is unique. Is that something that other farmers in your area do, or is that kind of a specialty that you guys do?
I think it's really special. I think that Jess has spent a lot of years working on those tea blends, and it's just a real passion. People ask, they think that I'm the herbalist, but she's the herbalist and I'm the mechanic, a different skill set.
Yeah, for sure. I love that, though. That's such a great idea. We have one farmer that has, like, chamomile. Mm-hmm. That's because he grows the flowers and stuff.
Yeah.
But having other teas, I feel like, is such a nice benefit at the farmer's market. So can you tell us a little bit about the Growing Growers program?
Oh, yeah. So the Growing Growers program is sponsored by K-State, the state ag university, and through their outreach extension office in Olathe. Actually, Jess and I both participated in the Growing Growers program, and we were apprentices on different farms. And that's actually how we met back in 2008. So we both completed the program. Yeah, they should put us on the brochure.
Growing love.
Growing love.
Yeah.
That's right.
But it's nice to be on the other side of things. We actually host apprentices every year and are participants in the Growing Growers program now. So I learned so much as an apprentice. I wish I would have written more down. I feel like I hope that I'm giving the same diversity of information as I received.
Oh, that's wonderful. Training the new ones, it's so important.
Yeah.
It's really vital.
Yeah.
I feel like something that if it gets missed, it's like, whoops, can't really go back and like hurry up and train somebody on all that. So that's awesome that you guys do that. So once you started the Sacred Sun Cooperative Farm, you guys started selling at farmers markets right away there. And then were markets like always part of the plan? Or when you started your farm, were you thinking you would take it in like a more wholesale direction and end up at farmers markets? How was that path there for you?
Yeah, I think that we wanted to start with farmers markets and direct sales, retail, but we've always loved the CSA model, and the goal was to have the farm really be based around the CSA model. So our CSA has grown every year that we've done this, and we're approaching 60 members this year, hopefully. But yeah, just the connection between the family or the person and the food and the farm, we really like to think of our CSA members as partners in our farm as part of the cooperative, so that we invite them to come out to the farm frequently and for get-togethers and such. But yeah, the CSA model is also economically a lot more stable. Farmers markets are wonderful, but if it rains, attendance really drops. So the CSA helped us, I think, just really budget and plan more consistently.
Yeah, it's great to have both.
Yeah, just not have all your eggs in one basket, as they say. But yeah, that's really helpful. With our farmers that have CSAs too, they say the same thing. It's like the farmers market is so great and those direct sales are wonderful. But if you have a slow week at the farmers market, you can always just count on that consistency of the CSA. So it's nice to have those two kind of complement each other.
Do you have people do CSA pickups at the markets? Or they just
that's primarily how we do it.
Great.
And we have done some deliveries, and then we have a few folks that like to pick up right from the farm. But mostly it's we bring our CSA shares to the Brookside market and distribute from our market tent.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I know that there's some market managers that don't like to see CSAs at the market for whatever reason, and I always think it's such an advantage to have CSAs there.
Yeah, because people are going to pick up their box, and then they're going to pick up a cookie and pick up a
or something that's not in their box, dairy if you've got a vegetable box or whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I find that a lot of our CSA members end up, picking up those other things that we don't carry. We don't have really any meat or bread. So I think it helps the market as a whole.
And you guys are still just at the Brookside Farmers Market. Are there any other markets in your area that would be a good option for you? Or are you planning to ever join any other markets, or are you just happy with the one?
Yeah, there's quite a few great markets in the area, in Kansas City alone. But we used to sell at the downtown Lawrence Farmers Market. It was also on Saturday morning, so we had to kind of choose between the two. But at one point, we were doing 3 different markets in a week. And we sell at there's a hardware store in Lawrence that has a private farmers market in the parking lot. It's an afternoon thing. It's really great. But that market kind of shut down with COVID. So currently, we just have one farmers market. I wish that we had more staff. We had more folks here so we could handle another market in another town. But the Brookside market is where, all our eggs are in that basket, and it's been really great.
Cool. Good.
Great. Well, we want to talk a lot about the Brookside Farmers Market because you guys kind of have a unique organizational structure, or at least not one that we see a whole lot here in Southern California. It's a lot different than the way that our markets are set up. So if you could just give us a little background on the Brookside Farmers Market, like when did it start? How did it come about?
Yeah, there were people growing with organic practices before 2003, but in 2003, a number of growers at a different market were kind of looking to branch out. I think they might have actually hired a consultant just to look at Kansas City population, and they found this school in the Brookside neighborhood with a parking lot, and they set up the Brookside Farmers Market there, and it's been going ever since, so roughly 17 years. And yeah, it's always been farmer-led, farmer-driven. I guess actually in the early years, there were more community members, but during the time that I've been involved, it's all been run by farmers. And a few years ago, previous board president started to involving more community members, and the board has gotten so much richer and so much stronger ever since. So we are volunteer-based, but I kind of misspoke. We're not entirely volunteer-based. We would be nothing without our market manager. Her name is Kira Gross, and we are able to hire her and increase her salary thanks to a USDA grant. She really is who runs the market, and the rest of us are there to kind of serve at the benefit of the market.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, we were kind of curious about that. We were like, how do they do entirely volunteer-run market? Yeah. Great. Well, that's great to hear that you have a market manager. That's so vital to have that point person, to have that person that can really devote their focus to all of the crazy things that it takes to run a market.
That's right.
Cool. We're going to dive deeper into kind of the organizational structure, and Kat's going to dive deep on some questions about the board. But so I have a feeling, just because it is a farmer-run market, that it kind of does it have a different vibe than other farmers markets you've been to? Like, what is the market community like? Who shops the market? How is it different than other farmers markets you've participated in?
Well, I haven't been to nearly as many farmers markets nationwide as I'd like to attend. I think it's actually some of the first markets I went to were like in Seattle, like Pike Place Market, and these really large markets that are tourist draws. So those have a very different structure than we do. And I noticed between some of the vendors that there wasn't maybe direct community between them. The great thing about our little market and being all farmer driven and vendor driven is that we have this strong sense of community. And there's also personal accountability amongst each other. It's not like we're just people filling a booth. We're really there for each other. We help each other. So, yeah.
That's great. And how many vendors and farmers do you typically have?
At the height of the season, we'll have roughly 30, 35 tables set up, along with additional tables, tents for like a community group, a kids tent, and then live musicians. We're trying to expand that. We're trying to get to 50 vendors this year, and we're getting closer. I think we're at like 45 currently.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a nice size market.
That's great. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we have an episode coming out in just a week or so about how to scout for new vendors. So
that's right. That's true.
Cool. So looking at your website, it seems like Brookside Farmers Market has really high standards and somewhat of a rigorous application process for accepting new vendors. So I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about what you require and what you expect from your vendors, and how your organization developed those guidelines.
Yeah. Well, so we are a market that the best way to say it. So our market, everyone produces with organic practices, as in like NOP organic practices, but not all of our vendors are certified organic producers, and many of us exceed and go beyond the NOP guidelines. So there's a really strong sense of environmentalism at the market, and I think all of our vendors are really they're up to the challenge. So when people apply to the market, we send them an application, and then they are asked to adhere to accept our farmers market pledge. The pledge just loosely dictates what some of our practices and beliefs are, kind of like a mission statement. And then from there, they submit, whether it's crops that they grow, seeds that they buy, all the other inputs that go into the farm. We go through a screening process with our vendor committee that's much like an organic inspection. So having been through organic inspections with our own farm, we're kind of used to that process. We just do it a little less formally amongst ourselves. which is kind of how organic inspections and the organic movement started. I guess some people refer to this as a participatory guarantee system. And we're developing that system continually. We're constantly talking about what our standards mean, the details, especially lately we've been talking a lot about value-added foods and how to be just as, in terms of like this, in terms of like the food chain, making sure that we have as much integrity as possible in those products that we bring to the community.
Yeah, that's great. That's where sometimes people will have really strict standards for farmers, and then they get a little loose on the grocery items and non-farm and things. And that's what makes a beautiful market in terms of a producer's market, is really making sure that your value-added foods, they call them all different things. Here we're mostly referring them to just as grocery products or as prepared food. In some other areas they call everything that's not farm produce value-added. And it's so important to make sure that those groups are just have as much integrity and use as many local ingredients as possible.
Yeah, and have you ever gotten in a situation where enforcing those rules becomes tricky? Or do you have to, lay down the hammer a little bit sometimes?
I know that previously in the market, I remember hearing maybe in the early days that, stories of a vendor that was bringing in produce that was bought from somewhere else and trucked in. And, the vendors, the people next to that stand could kind of tell. Someone from the market just went and did kind of a random inspection and found that it was true. And that person was, removed from the market. They were told they couldn't come back. Nothing like that has happened in years. And I think it's because there's this imbued sense of integrity that no one there really wants to cheat or work around the rules. But now and then we do have issues come up, and we do our best to handle those diplomatically. I think that we have had an issue in the past with one vendor that was running out of something, onions, for example, and wanted to source those onions from another organic producer that wasn't their table. We've had really strong standards of the person behind the table who grew that food. There is no buying and reselling taking place at the market. And what we've ended up doing is maybe trying to help that vendor work with a couple other vendors and become a small producer group. So that way, all three of their farms can be represented. They can maybe take turns at the table each weekend because they have other jobs. It's hard for them to attend regularly. So rather than just kicking a person out, finding out what the real source of the problem and addressing that compassionately. And we found, hopefully, a better answer.
That's great. I'm sure it helps, too, because you are farmer run, that you can understand the complexities of what it is to run a farm, where if you're just a market manager alone operating the market without the support of other people who really know what it's like to work on a farm, it might be hard to kind of put yourself in the shoes of those growers. So that's great.
Yeah, it's great to know where they're coming from.
Another part of your application process that I saw on your website is that you vendors have to organize or host a gathering or open house at their business at least once a year.
Yeah, farm tour. It's a lot of fun. And so it's been great to see other people's farms firsthand. We get to talk shop. The community gets to come out and see, exactly where the food is grown. And there's a lot of, nuts and bolts questions about machinery. I'm a big gear person, so I always end up talking about gear. And then with our farm, I really enjoy, we have our farm tour in the fall, right around Halloween. We also time it with, I have like a haunted house at my farm. So that way CSA members, market members, the public at large can come to the farm, see the vegetable gardens and our animals and all of that, but also tour this silly haunted house.
So it's not so much a inspection kind of open house. It's not so much the farm board or whatever going out to inspect growing methods or any of that. It's more of a kind of get to know each other and let the community get to know who you are and how you're growing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we have really intelligent customers and community members, and folks see our fields and can kind of see that they're not perfect and that we really are using organic practices. So yeah, and also just inviting them into your home is such a personal thing that it just reinforces that.
That's really fun. I would love to go visit all of our farmers' farms.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. One question to get back to the unique geography of your area, because you have farmers coming from multiple different states to your market. Are there any weird regulation things that you have to deal with where something in Missouri is different than Kansas? And how do you navigate the differences in those like agricultural and farmers market regulations?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because Kansas City is a border town, it's on the Missouri River, so half in Missouri, half in Kansas.
Bridget, are you taking notes?
My mind is blown right now. Thank you. I just learned something.
We do have these different regulations that affect vendors. So our farm is in Kansas, but we go across state lines to sell in Missouri. When it comes to sales tax, for example, you can sell up to $25,000 before you have to claim sales tax, but then you have to pay for cover all of that sales tax from $0 up to $25,000 and beyond. That only affects us because we're in Kansas. People in Missouri have different different practices they have to adhere to. Another big one is cottage industry. When we sell at markets in Lawrence, Topeka, we can do baking from our farm and take it there under cottage industry laws, but that won't transfer over to Missouri. So we have cottage industry bakers in Missouri that are serving the market, and there's quite a lot of them actually. So yeah, we're fortunate in that respect. And then tax base is different. We really require each individual farm to take care of their own taxes. The market takes care of its own. But it's different for me rather than the folks next to me because they're on the Missouri side.
Interesting. Yeah, that'd be complicated. I know the folks at Fresh Farm in D.C. have markets in 3 different counties and states. So they're in Maryland, D.C., and Virginia. And so they've got market staff that moves between those markets, and they said it's very confusing sometimes to remember which regulations they're complying with that day.
That's one benefit of California being so gigantic.
That's right. That's true. Yeah.
But we do have a fair amount of people who come to our market wanting to sell, but they produce in Mexico. And sadly we can't let them because the California laws don't allow that. It's unfortunate because if you're doing kind of like a 100-mile diet, we're in San Diego, we're actually closer to Mexico than we are to Fresno, California, for instance. We can have those guys sell, but we can't have the Mexican farmers sell. So it's interesting. So we've clarified that your organization is volunteer run, but you do have a paid manager that kind of runs things. How much does your board influence what the manager does? How often does she have to report to you? Does she establish the guidelines, or are you establishing that and she has to conform to those?
Yeah, and I should say that it's a great question, and that role is actually changing constantly. I think that for the longest time we had a market manager. First was a volunteer position. Then we decided to actually try and hire a full-time manager, and once we did, we were able to find someone that also was able to write grants and manage a USDA grant, which now we're able to have a full-time market manager. And I think that in the past, those volunteer market managers served as a benefit of the board. We're talking a lot about changing our structures so that really the board serves at the pleasure, at the benefit of the market manager, and thinking of changing our market manager position to more of a general manager position. So then the general manager would be in charge of all the day-to-day operations as well as development, outreach, more grant writing. And our market manager position would return to more of this part-time volunteer-based work that's just for running the market tent, the blue tent at market each weekend.
Gotcha.
That would free up, our general manager to do more of the developmental tasks.
So she'd become more of a kind of an executive director type position that you'll see at some markets that have multiple markets and things. How do you currently select board members?
Well, people volunteer. It's hard to get farmers to volunteer, but luckily we have a few that are willing. We have a volunteer treasurer, although we have outsourced some of that to a public accountant. Thankfully, it was a lot for our treasurer to take care of. And then we have community members that step forward graciously and donate their time and energy.
So how many people on the board altogether?
I think currently we're at 14.
So that's a good-sized board. How often do you meet?
Yeah. Usually once a month. I'd say that we meet a little bit less frequently in the summer because everyone is so busy. During the winter is when we get a lot of our nuts and bolts work done. We also have special committees. We currently have a grant committee that's working on market development. We have people that participate in the market. All vendors have to sign up for either the marketing committee or the vendor committee. And so, we have folks that work on advertising and signage, and then we have other folks that are actually reviewing files and looking at future applicants.
Wow, that's great. And if you,
That's really cool.
requiring each of the members to do that, that's a big commitment to being in the farmers market.
Yeah.
A working board, that just is
Yeah,
a dream.
Not just people that
It's a dream. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
So you're on are you on your third term on the board?
Yeah, that's right. I've been the vendor committee chair before, and now, I'm serving as the board president.
That's great. How long have you been president?
Oh, just a few months.
Oh, okay, so you're new. Well, congratulations. Welcome to the new regime. So obviously there's a lot of value in having farmers and vendors on a board of directors. They understand that perspective. Are there also conflicts there? Do you have board members that sell meat that don't want you to take a new meat vendor? I'm asking that because I've done some strategic planning work with other organizations lately, and there's things like that have come up when there's a committee that's made up of people that are in the market. You've got to, how do you manage that kind of conflict of interest stuff?
No, it's fun. That definitely happens. And I remember, I guess like a brief story. I remember a few years ago, another vendor, a local bakery, wanted to bring fresh milled grains and flours and such to market. And I noticed that they were selling this to the table, and I was like, oh, they're bringing this product. And the board met. They wanted to talk about whether this other vendor should be approved to carry these things, or should we save that space for Jake because he was the kind of first one doing it. I actually recused myself from that decision because it was kind of a conflict of interest. And then the board decided that we didn't need to have two grain vendors, flour vendors at the time. I was actually really hoping to get more flour vendors at market because I can only grow so many varieties, and this other person was bringing really great stuff. Well, it's about 3 years later, this vendor is hopefully going to be returning to market. We'll have more grains and flours than ever before. But there's kind of that scarcity mindset that happens sometimes where folks are afraid, like you said, the example of a meat vendor that, there's going to be someone else come in, they're going to lose their market niche. But what I see time and time again is that it just seems like more is more. There's a certain threshold that you get to when you have just enough vendors in a large enough market that, there's people can comfortably fit in the space, and there's just enough product for everyone. So I try to approach things with more of an abundance mindset than a scarcity mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that's tricky sometimes to explain. I think especially to vendors and farmers that have been in a market for a really long time, and maybe it started out kind of small, and they were coming from that kind of space. But the fact is, consumers like choice, and we're not competing with each other. We're competing with the grocery store. So the more choice you can give the consumer, the more consumers you'll generally see at the market. And rising tide, floating all boats, all those good things. I would question with the bakery, were they producing? I think it would be not necessarily a good idea to say, oh, let's let Jake have the whole grain and flour business, but I can see giving preference to somebody that's actually producing those as opposed to if the bakery's buying them from somebody else and then bringing them. I totally get the producer's market kind of viewpoint.
And you're right. And that really was the decision that was made. I was given kind of preferential treatment because I was actually growing it. And that was great at the time, but as our market's grown, there's just increased demand for more grains and flours and a diversity. The pandemic brought out so many armchair bakers that now I have people asking for red fife and, heirloom corn, and before they were happy with just what I had. So I'm excited to have, these other things available in the future.
Yeah, it's really exciting. That's such a big turnaround because we had somebody doing heirloom grains that was at our conference a few years ago, and then we did some taste testing. And what people don't realize is grains are like tomatoes. When you get them fresh and when you get heirloom varieties, there's a huge variety of flavor in those, and the way that they're milled makes a big difference. And I think Americans have just taken for granted that enriched white flour is what bread tastes like, but it's really not. And so it's really exciting to see you maintaining the biodiversity of the grains and see other people working on bringing those heirloom grains back and getting them to the consumer. And silver lining on the pandemic, all these people started baking and now they're seeing the difference in what's out there. So that's incredible. So will you run for board chair again? How long are those terms?
Oh, I think that I'm on for another 2 years, but we'll see. I like being on the board. I think I'll always serve in some capacity or another. A lot of folks, once they serve as board chair, they tend to take a year or two off and step back, maybe I'll decide. But I feel like I just got started.
Yeah, great. So you're just new to it. Do you have any kind of general words of wisdom for other markets considering having a really big advisory board or a board that actually has decision-making powers? Anything to watch out for or be aware of?
Oh, gosh. I can't say that there's any like traps or pitfalls that I could specifically point folks towards, other than I think when you have more hands steering the ship, you're gonna have a better course. I need a better aphorism. But like when you have more people involved, it just adds energy. And when other people need to step back, it keeps the ball moving forward.
Yeah,
so
I
great. Encourage people to diversify their board.
Yeah, that's terrific. And then there's we wanted to ask about your community members. So that sounds almost like a docent program. You have community members that get involved with the market. It sounds like not so much as hands-on volunteers as sort of a whole branch of marketing folks and ambassadors and non-social influencers.
Market
community influencers,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah, well, it's some of both, because people can, different folks can provide different services. So we have some folks that just really love helping out each weekend at the market and running the blue tents, and I'm so thankful for them. Whereas other folks, their weekends are really precious, and so they're better in terms of kind of multitasking or working from their home, and being on our Zoom calls or helping with governance. So yeah, we have some folks that just want to help with the kids table and pass out crayons. So
nice. Do you ask
folks are with? Yeah.
Do you ask for a specific level of commitment on those things when they volunteer? Do they have to agree to be there a certain number of days a month, or do certain tasks on a regular basis?
Yeah, and I think that's all on a case-by-case basis. We just ask people to be kind of realistic and accountable, and it usually works out really well.
Oh, that's good. Great. Yeah, it's a great way to keep the community involved. And you also have a sponsorship section on your website. It looks like there's only one sponsor posted there now. I don't know if that's because the website's not updated, or if you just have all your power behind that one sponsor. Is that something that's a new program, or are you actively reaching out to additional sponsors?
Yeah, we are actively reaching out. We're not, categorized as like a not-for-profit or 501c3. We've talked about maybe developing a separate 501c3 arm, like a foundation, so we can take more donations and such. But currently, we just have a couple of great organizations that believe in the market, and they're willing to help support. So Missouri Organics is one. They're a compost service that, actually we buy compost and use it here at the farm. So it's really, completing the circles. And then also another local solar company has, become a new sponsor and is helping with the market costs as well.
That sound like really nicely aligned businesses for your market.
Yeah, and if you find the right alignment, I think we're finding, and we're hearing, like from Melissa Maltese, who spoke at the conference, a lot of sponsorship now. It's harder actually to get people to sponsor with the idea that they're donating to an organization, even if it's a 501c3. Sponsorship is really built more now on marketing partnerships. So they want to be aligned with a market because you're basically reaching out to the same demographic that company has. And, it makes them look good, and customers are more inclined to trust them if they've got an alignment with the market that they love and trust. Yeah, I think that's really effective. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah,
that was really...
Oh, thank you as well.
I learned about geography. I learned about boards that work hard and participate in running markets. And
haunted houses.
And haunted houses on farms. I'd like to come check that out.
Farm tours, for sure. Yeah, I really love it. Anything else you want to share that we didn't ask you?
No, this has been great. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah,
you as well.
With us. And now we know which market to hit next time we're passing through Kansas or Missouri.
Or Missouri.
Yeah,
that's right. or both.
Is there
like
a line?
Road.
Is there like a line where I can have like 1 foot in one state and 1 foot in the other? It's at the market.
Right, you'd be in the river.
Yeah. In the river. Okay, maybe not.
Maybe with a canoe we can do that.
There we go.
All right. Thanks again, Jake. Thank you so much
Jake.
for being with us.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening today, and big thanks to American Farmland Trust for actively protecting farmland and influencing policy to keep farmers growing, and for supporting Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast. For more information or to join AFT, just click their logo on the resource page at farmersmarketpros.com.
Farmers markets are all about connection, and all of us, operators, farmers, and vendors, keep learning. Connect with people just like you from various parts of the country and share what's happening in your area in the terrific conversations over in our private Facebook group, the Farmers Market Pros Community. If you're actively involved in a farmers market, please find us there, answer the 3 qualifying questions, and join the group. You can also message us on Instagram at Farmers Market Pros or email us at connect@farmersmarketpros.com. If you're looking for further education, check out our online course offerings at farmersmarketpros.com. Thanks for listening to Tent Talk. Please leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you access your podcasts, and tell us and others how you're enjoying Tent Talk. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss the next episode. Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast, is proudly produced by Farmers Market Pros, where passion meets profit. Today's episode was recorded and edited by Justine Marzoni-Mead. Original music by David Mead. Thank you so much for listening today, and we'll have another great episode next week, so tune in.